And it was during this time that my mom taught me this game called Essences, for which I will be eternally grateful, because it taught me how to decode the world and understand my reality using the tool of metaphor. And the way that this game is played is that one person thinks of an individual in their minds and challenges the rest of the players to guess the identity of that person by asking metaphoric questions about their essence. We're gonna play here, okay? And I'm thinking of an individual, and you might say to me, Sally, if this person were an animal, what animal would they be? To which I might say, praying mantis. And then you might ask me, if this person were a food, what kind of food would they be? And I might say, a red hot chili pepper. And then if you asked me, if this person were a vehicle, what kind of vehicle would they be? And I would say, a bicycle, a rusty bicycle. And if you asked if this person were a beverage, what beverage would they be? And I might say, a shot of whiskey. And then if you asked, is this person Mick Jagger? I would say, yes, it is Mick Jagger. Now, the interesting part of this game came after the individual's identity was revealed. And each of us got to sort of talk about the different ways we would have metaphorically described this person. So if we were sitting around in my living room, my brother might say something like, you know, Sal, I get the bike, but I would have said celery for food. Or I see him more as a cat. And my mom would have said, oh no, not celery, definitely not celery. And have you considered that maybe Mick Jagger is more of like a rocket ship for a vehicle? Don't read into that. And so through this conversation, through this game and this conversation, I really got to see how differently we each experience the world around us, how differently we each see, and what an amazingly creative and artistic experience just the act of perception is. And this was my first sort of step into my own artistic journey and into the realization that art can be used not just as a statement, but as a conversation. And so fast forward now, and I'm going to school at Brown University, and I'm studying anthropology, and I race to my first class just in time to squeeze into my seat as my professor is about to completely blow my mind. And what he says is that he's going to tell us this fable about 8 blind men and an elephant. And the way this fable goes is that these 8 blind men are traveling down this dark and sort of stormy path when they come upon this elephant, and each of the blind men feels a different part of the elephant's body before coming to a completely different understanding of what the animal is. So the one who feels the tusk says elephant is a spear. And the one who feels the tail says elephant is a rope. And the one that feels the ear says elephant is a fan. And each of them feeling a different part and concluding a completely different truth, they argue for the righteousness of their own perspective until this wise king comes along and he says, you know, stop fighting. Each of you is holding only one piece of this thing. But in order to understand the greater whole, you need to listen to one another and share your different experiences. And the way that I see it is that each of us is like one of these blind men. We get to feel only a tiny, tiny sliver of the gigantic nature that, that is reality. But then with that limited perspective, we think we know much more of the whole. And we sort of befriend those who agree with us and discredit those who see it differently. But so much more could be revealed if we actually had the capacity and the language to listen to each other and share our different experiences. After all, we come to this planet and we only have 5 senses. And these are the only tools we get to explore the vastness of this beast that is reality. With this minuscule palette of universal elements like photons, chemicals, pressure, and sound waves, and our brains paint everything we see, taste, touch, hear, and smell against the canvas of our minds. The world's mysteries play themselves out against our brains, the instrument of our brains. And then We react by creating this world that we live in. So we're all artists. We're all artists. But without the appropriate tools to be able to express these inner world visions that we've created, we're basically painting them in a dark room where no one else has access to them. And no wonder we feel alone and afraid and insecure. So here I am at 24, so I'm making music, and I'm playing out 180 shows a year, and I'm on stage, and I feel as though something is missing. I feel like I'm only able to access one tiny part of something much bigger. I feel like I'm like a blind man holding the tail, right? And so much more is out there that I just don't have access to. And so I decide that I need more blind men. And thus, Consenses is born. I created my own elephant. I collected 22 images that represented different aspects of one thing, of the same thing. And then I designated 22 musicians. And I gave each of those musicians one of these photographs. And I asked them, what does this mean to you? There are no right or wrong answers. Express it as a song. And they returned to me those songs. And I extracted the song from the photograph that had inspired it. And I gave each of those songs to a dancer. And I asked the dancer, interpret what this means to you and express it as movement. And when the dances came back, I gave each of those dances to a painter. And each of those paintings to a perfumer who extracted the essence of those paintings and expressed it as a perfume. And then I took the perfumes and I gave them to poets, and the poems to chefs, and the food they created to sculptors, until all of the senses were represented. And at the end, 150 artists from around the world, some very well known and some completely obscure, had participated in this global game of telephone through the senses. None of them were actually privy to the identities of the other participants, and none got to see further back into these interpretive chains beyond the one piece of art that I provided them. So, the painter never got to hear the song, the perfumer never got to see the dance, etc. And after I'd done this 22 times, I gave each of these chains to a set designer and asked them to interpret this chain as a whole and create a physical space which this art can live within. And once all of the sets were done, I collected them into a large open space and opened it up to the public. When visitors come into this exhibit, when they come into one of these sets, they are presented with the original photograph. Then this song comes on, and the visitor is carried to a different point of view.
How long have we waited for your love? How long, how long? How long is the day when your love is gone? How long, how long? When you hear the troubled wind, your long night begins. Listen to the beating of your heart a while. Maybe fleeting at the start, but in that beating of your heart there's a song, let it rise. It says, how long have we waited for your love? How long?
So that's thank you. People are able to contemplate the possibility that perhaps there is no right or wrong answer, no good and bad. Perhaps there are just different angles of perspective on a greater truth. And perhaps, like different facets of a prism, we each take in the sunlight of inspiration and cast our own versions against the floor. And in this way, our separateness is so beautiful. For if it makes us make art, then it makes life worthwhile. The dilemma of our separateness, the problem with it, is that we feel alone and isolated and insecure and disconnected because we don't have the necessary tools. We don't have the right language to express and expose the stories of our glorious adventure on this planet. It's like the bad news is you're falling through the air. Nothing to hang on to. No parachute. But the good news is there's no ground. Consensus is the language I've been looking for since I was 10 years old. It's art as a conversation and a language rather than art as a destination. And it makes us see beyond ourselves. And when we can see beyond ourselves, then we can see that there is no ground. And if we can see that there is no ground, then my God, we're flying. Thank you.